David, the young shepherd chosen by God, walked alone against the giant Goliath. But what if the stone had not struck? If David had died on that battlefield, Israel would lose its future king. The Psalms might never exist, and the lineage that would lead to the Messiah could disappear. A single death could erase centuries of prophecies. Today we shall explore what would happen if David fell before Goliath, and the consequences are far darker than you imagine. Watch until the end, because the final scenario reveals how a defeat could change all of biblical history. Leave a like, subscribe, and prepare to behold David and Goliath in a way that has never been explained thus. The stone flies through the air and strikes Goliath right in the middle of the forehead. The impact sounds loud, dry, like wood cracking. Blood runs down the giant's face. He staggers. For a second, only a second, it seems he will collapse. Everyone holds their breath. But then Goliath shakes his head. He wipes the blood with his hand. And when he looks at David again, that look is not of pain. It is of pure rage. The kind of rage that comes when someone wounds you but does not defeat you, when someone humiliates you but you are still standing. Goliath advances, not slowly, not stumbling. He runs, a giant of nearly 3 meters, running with all his might toward a boy who has barely begun to grow a beard. David tries to take another stone, tries to whirl the sling again, but there is no time. There is no time for anything. Goliath's sword cuts the air, and David falls. Simple as that. No heroes, no miracle. Only a small body falling on the dry earth of the valley of Elah. The silence that follows is different from any battle silence. It is not that pause before the attack. It is not tension. It is shock. It is the sound of thousands of men trying to process what they have just seen. Because they were beginning to believe. After 40 days of hearing Goliath shout challenges, after 40 days of fear, that boy appeared from nowhere and said he would resolve it. And for a moment, when he walked to the field without armor, without fear, something inside every Israelite soldier thought, perhaps this is real. Perhaps God is about to do the impossible, but he does not. And when David falls, what dies there is not just a boy. It is hope. It is the idea that faith alone can change things. It is the last spark that was keeping that entire army standing. The Philistines explode. They shout, beat shields, advance in mass. And the Israelites run. They do not retreat in an organized manner. They do not try to form a defense. They simply run. Soldiers drop spears, shields, helmets, everything that weighs them down. The only thing that matters is not being caught. The hills echo with the cries of men being overtaken, being killed while they flee. It is a massacre. Saul sees everything from atop the hill. He was already broken before this. He already spent sleepless nights, already had that constant sensation that God had turned his back on him. He tried to be king, tried to lead, but it always seemed wrong. It always seemed that he was not the right choice. And then this boy appeared, this shepherd who spoke with such certainty about God, about victory, about the impossible. And for a moment Saul thought perhaps it is still possible. Perhaps God is still here. But when he sees David's body on the ground, when he sees his army running in panic, Saul understands. There is no perhaps. God has truly departed. Israel is alone. He is alone. In the following days, the border cities begin to fall. The Philistines not only win the battle, they advance with everything. They take Soko, they take Azekah, they push ever deeper into Israelite territory. And Israel cannot reorganize because the defeat in the valley of Elah was not only military, it was spiritual. It broke something profound. Saul tries to react. He summons tribes, tries to gather forces, but no one responds as they should. The tribes begin to calculate, they begin to think, is it worth continuing to fight? Perhaps it is better to negotiate with the Philistines. Perhaps it is better for each to look after his own territory. And the more Saul presses, the more he demands loyalty, the more desperate he appears, the weaker he appears. And then the true paranoia begins. Saul starts to see betrayal everywhere. A general takes too long to answer an order? Traitor. A tribal leader questions a strategy? Conspiracy. Saul begins to imprison people, to execute allies he believes are plotting against him. The palace becomes a place of terror. Counselors are afraid to speak. Soldiers are afraid to err. Everyone walks on tiptoe, waiting for the king's next outburst. Now comes the void that David's absence leaves. Because in the real history, David is the man who unites everything. He is of Judah, but the other tribes like him. He is a warrior, but also a musician, a poet. He knows how to speak with soldiers and with priests. He is charismatic in a way that makes people from all clans feel represented. And that is exactly what Israel needs. A country of bickering tribes, of regions that barely speak to one another, needs someone who makes everyone look in the same direction. But that someone is dead in the valley of Elah. Without David, the tribes remain loose. Each protects its own territory, makes its own alliances, follows its own interests. Judah stays on one side, Ephraim on the other, Benjamin in the middle, trying not to displease anyone. Meetings of leaders turn into brawls. Everyone wants more autonomy, more power. No one trusts anyone. And meanwhile, the Philistines consume the map. Jonathan tries to hold the situation. He is the son of Saul. He is courageous. He has already proven he knows how to lead in battle. People respect him. But Jonathan has two problems. First, he is the son of Saul. And the more Saul loses his mind, the more this becomes a burden. Second, he does not have that brilliance that David would have. Jonathan is good, but he is not exceptional. He is loyal, but he is not inspiring. And without that profound friendship he would have had with David, without that bond that would shape decisions and create bridges between him and other tribes, Jonathan remains trapped. He spends the years trying to put out fires, trying to calm his father, trying to convince tribes not to separate. It is a Sisyphean task. Meanwhile, the Philistines do not only dominate militarily, they begin to install governors. They place officials in conquered cities, charge heavy taxes, recruit young Israelites to work on Philistine projects. And they do this intelligently. They do not try to erase Israelite culture all at once. They let local worship happen, let traditions continue, but they gradually infiltrate their own practices. Images of Philistine gods begin to appear in markets. Philistine festivals become mandatory. Slowly, the Israelite identity is diluted, and there is a detail that corrodes everything from within, the question that no one can answer. Why did God let David die? Because look, David was not an arrogant warrior seeking glory. He was a shepherd, a boy who saw a giant insulting his God and decided to do something. If anyone deserved divine victory, it was he. But it did not come. The stone struck, but it was not enough. And this raises a terrible doubt. Has God abandoned Israel? Prophets try to explain. Some say it was collective punishment, that the people had sinned so much that even the pure faith of a youth could not reverse it. Others say it was a test, that God is seeing who will continue to believe even when it seems he is not there. There are even those who say David was wrong, that he was presumptuous, that he thought he could win alone when he should have waited for the army. But none of these answers satisfy, because what the people saw was a courageous boy die trying to save everyone. And if God did not intervene there, why should anyone trust that he will intervene anywhere else? Faith in Israel begins to crack. Some become more devout, more rigid, trying to compensate by following every rule, every ritual, every law to the letter. Others begin to drift away. They begin to think that perhaps the Philistine gods are stronger. Perhaps it is worth pleasing them too, just to be safe. Religious syncretism spreads. Mixed altars appear. Israelites make offerings both to the God of Israel and to Dagon. The years pass and Saul finally dies. It may be in battle, it may be by disease, it may even be by suicide. It does not matter much. What matters is that when he dies, there is no obvious successor. Jonathan even tries to take over, but he has no base. Southern tribes do not accept him. Northern tribes want one of their own. A dispute begins that lasts for years. Small civil wars, political assassinations, Israel fragments for good. And without a centralized capital, without a strong king, there is no way to build lasting structures. In the real history, David chooses Jerusalem exactly because it does not belong to any tribe. It is neutral territory. This makes it the perfect place to centralize power without displeasing anyone. David conquers the city, brings the Ark of the Covenant there, transforms it into the religious and political heart of Israel. But here, this does not happen. Jerusalem remains an irrelevant little town. Perhaps it even falls into the hands of the Philistines at some point, and without Jerusalem as a center, Israel never truly becomes united. It is only a loose confederation of tribes that sometimes cooperate but generally fight. There is another enormous loss: the Psalms. David in the real history writes dozens of poems and chants. They become central to Jewish spirituality for millennia. Psalms that speak of anguish, of joy, of repentance, of praise, that give words to feelings that people cannot express alone, that create a shared language of faith. Without David, these psalms do not exist. It may even be that other people write chants, other poetic traditions arise. But it is not the same thing. It does not have that depth, that mixture of vulnerability and strength that David's psalms possess. Israelite spirituality develops in a drier manner, more focused on law and ritual, less on emotion and personal connection with God. And then comes the greater blow. Without David, there is no Solomon, and without Solomon, there is no Temple of Jerusalem, the temple which, in the real history, defines Judaism. It is the place where God dwells, where sacrifices are offered, where the divine presence manifests. It is so central that when the Babylonians destroy it centuries later, it is a national trauma. The entire exile revolves around the longing for the temple, the hope of rebuilding it. But here this temple is never built. It may be that some later king tries to build something similar somewhere, but it will not have the same weight. It will not have the history of Solomon, the wisdom, the resources, the period of peace and prosperity that allowed the construction. Without the Temple of Jerusalem, the Israelite religion remains decentralized. Local altars gain importance. Each region develops its own practices, and this makes it much harder to maintain religious cohesion. As the decades pass, Israel becomes easy prey. When the Assyrians begin to expand their empire, when they sweep through the region conquering everything, Israel has no structure to resist. It has no unified army, no strong alliances, no king capable of negotiating. The northern tribes fall first, then those of the center. Judah might hold on a little longer, but eventually it also falls. And when it falls, it is not like in the real history. There is no unified exile to Babylon, no prophets maintaining hope, no promise of return. It is only dispersion. Israelites scattered, absorbed by other peoples, losing language, losing tradition, losing identity. In a few generations, Israel ceases to exist as a distinct people. But returning to that moment in the valley of Elah, that specific death becomes legend, and depending on who tells it, the story changes. For some, David becomes a symbol of presumption, the boy who thought faith alone was enough, who did not respect the size of the enemy. It becomes a warning story. Do not be a fool, do not overestimate your chances, do not trust blindly. For others, he becomes a pure martyr, the youth who gave everything for the cause, who showed supreme courage even knowing he could lose. He becomes an example of sacrifice, not of victory. And this ambiguity transforms the concept of heroism. Instead of celebrating the conquering warrior, the king who triumphs, the culture begins to value other types of greatness. Prophets who speak truth even at risk, sages who guide with words, not with swords, spiritual leaders who maintain faith even when all seems lost. The model of leadership changes, less focused on military power, more on spiritual resistance. But there is an enormous void that this change leaves: the messianic hope. In the real history, there arises this powerful expectation of a future king from the lineage of David. An anointed one who will restore Israel, bring justice, establish eternal peace. Prophets speak of this for centuries. The people wait for it. It is a promise that traverses generations, that maintains hope even in the darkest moments. But without David, without a Davidic dynasty, from whence comes this promise? Perhaps it simply does not exist. Perhaps Israelite hope focuses on other things, on spiritual restoration, on a return to the law, on collective purification, Or perhaps a different messianic expectation arises, coming from another tribe, creating a completely distinct tradition. But that specific promise of the Son of David, that royal lineage that so many would await, that disappears. Centuries later, when scribes try to assemble the history of the people, when they try to understand what happened, they look back and see the turning point, the day in the valley of Elah. And they ask themselves, what if David had won? How would it be? Perhaps Israel would have become great. Perhaps Jerusalem would have flourished. Perhaps faith would have consolidated, the temple been built, the royal lineage established. But for them, this is fantasy. The reality is dispersed tribes, lost cities, fragmented identity. And all because of a stone that flew through the air in that dusty valley and almost made the impossible happen. It struck, but it was not enough. And because it was not enough, an entire timeline changed direction. What remains is the question that traverses generations. What is faith when the miracle does not come? David had courage, he had conviction, but the stone did not topple the giant. So was his faith wrong? Or sometimes, even with absolute faith, do things simply not work? And how does a people continue believing when the impossible does not happen? When God seems silent, when the hero dies and the villain wins, there is no easy answer. And perhaps that is exactly what makes this version so devastating. Because it offers no comfort, it offers no clean moral lesson. It offers only the brutal reality that sometimes, no matter how pure your cause, no matter how strong your faith, sometimes the stone is simply not enough. And you have to figure out what to do next.